I lied to him from the very first day. Not because I wanted to hurt him, but because, back then, I didn't really know who I wanted to be myself. My name is Elisa, and the story I am about to tell you began one rainy evening, in a rattling old tram that smelled of wet coats and nostalgia. I remember how the city lights blurred behind the fogged-up windows, how raindrops traced random paths on the glass. I had just finished another exhausting day at work, clutching my bag as if it could protect me from my own emptiness. Then he boarded the tram. He looked different. Not just because of his slightly messy hair or the gray scarf wrapped carelessly around his neck. There was something about his eyes, sad, searching, almost as if he carried a question he was too afraid to ask. In his hand, he held an old, yellowed letter, folded so many times it was falling apart. We weren't supposed to talk. Strangers rarely do. But when he sat next to me and our eyes met, the silence felt heavier than words. Do you ever feel like coming back somewhere just to see if anything's still there? He asked softly, almost as if speaking to himself. His voice surprised me, and before I could stop myself, I nodded. Yes, I whispered. All the time. That night, he told me his name was Danilo. He had just returned to the city after many years, chasing memories he couldn't quite let go of. I told him I was an artist, looking for inspiration in the rain-soaked streets. But that wasn't true. In reality, I spent my days in a small gray office, fixing numbers in spreadsheets, silently sketching dreams on sticky notes I'd later throw away. I hadn't painted properly in years. But I wanted him to see me as someone interesting, someone alive. When the tram reached my stop, he smiled and said, "Maybe we'll run into each other again." I didn't believe we would. But fate had other plans. Part 2, Small Gaffes and Half-Truths. A few days later, I saw him again, this time in a tiny CAF tucked away in an old courtyard. The place smelled of cinnamon and fresh bread, and the rain tapped softly on the window beside him. He was sitting alone, the same letter beside his coffee cup. Elisa, he remembered my name. Funny running into you again. We talked about books, the city, favorite places to hide when the world felt too loud. I told him more lies, harmless ones. I told myself that I was working on an exhibition, that I spent my mornings in parks sketching strangers. I could see in his eyes he liked what he heard. But what scared me most was how much I liked being that version of me, too. As weeks passed, our meetings became a ritual. Evenings after work, I'd run to change out of my office clothes, brushing paint on my hands so I'd look real. Then we'd meet in quiet cafes, walk through empty streets, or sit on park benches until it got too cold. Danilo shared stories of his past. A girl he once loved deeply, who, he said, painted sunsets better than anyone else. She'd moved away, and letters between them had slowly stopped. He still carried the last letter she'd sent, the one in his coat pocket. He never let me read it, and I never dared to ask. One evening, as autumn turned colder, he looked at me and said, almost apologetically, "You remind me of her not just because of the painting. It's something in the way you see the world." My chest tightened. Was she very special? I asked. She was, he nodded, looking out the window. But sometimes, love isn't enough to keep two people together. I wanted to confess everything in that moment. To tell him that the girl he thought he saw wasn't real. But the fear of losing him kept my lips sealed. Part 3, Disappearance. Then, without warning, Danilo disappeared. Our usual CAF seat stayed empty. His phone went straight to voicemail. Days turned into weeks. My lies now felt like ghosts that haunted every corner of the city. At night, I walked by the places we'd been, half hoping to see him standing there, coat collar turned up against the wind. I blamed myself. Maybe he had discovered the truth, maybe someone told him. Or maybe had never truly been mine to lose. In his absence, something strange happened. I began to draw again. Really draw. Not for him, not to keep a lie alive, but for me. In my small apartment, canvases filled with unfinished thoughts, regrets, and quiet hopes. It felt raw and frightening, but also honest. Months later, my drawings finally felt like something real, something that belonged to me. Part 4. The Unexpected Return. One rainy afternoon, I walked home, carrying a rolled-up canvas under my arm. I turned the corner, and there he was. Danilo stood in the doorway of my building, hair damp, holding the same letter and a small bouquet of wilted wildflowers. "Hi," he said, his voice as soft as I remembered. "I am sorry I disappeared." I wanted to speak, but nothing came out. My heart pounded so loudly I was afraid he'd hear. "I had to figure something out," he continued. "I thought if I stayed away, the memory of her would fade. But it didn't. And then I realized I was running not just from her, but from what I felt for you." His words hung between us, heavy and trembling. "I am not who you think I am," I finally whispered. "I lied. I am not really an artist. I work in an office. I was scared you'd never look at me otherwise." He was silent for what felt like an eternity. And then he smiled, tiredly but warmly. "Elisa, I didn't fall for your stories. I fell for the way your eyes light up when you talk about what you love. For the way you listened. The real you was always there, even behind the lies." He handed me the letter. "I never let anyone read it. But maybe it's time." My hands trembled as I unfolded the fragile paper. It read, "Greater than if you ever find someone who makes you feel alive again, don't run away because of me. Love is meant to grow, not to keep you chained to the past." Tears blurred the ink, but I didn't care. When I looked up, Danilo's eyes were shining too. So he said softly, "Can we start over? But this time, no masks?" Epilogue. Truth. I nodded. "Yes. I'd like that. I don't know what comes next. Maybe it won't be perfect. But this time, I've learned something. Real love doesn't come when we become who we think we should be. It comes when we finally dare to be exactly who we are. And sometimes it begins with a lie, but if you're brave enough, it can end with the truth."